Her final smile hid a truth no one expected. Welcome to Fog Casebook. I am your host, Viola. Tell me your location below. I love your comments. Into the case. It was a night so still that even the old oak trees lining the drive of Velacourt Manor seemed to hold their breath. The manor itself, white stone, ivy-laced, and tastefully grand in the way only Old English money could manage, glimmered under a crescent moon. Inside, laughter drifted down corridors, champagne glasses clinked, and the string quartet played a lilting waltz for the guests of Lady Eugenia Velacourt's annual spring charity gala. At precisely 9:30, the atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, no shattering glass or sudden screams, but subtly, as though an invisible thread had been pulled taut, and the first person to sense it was, curiously, not a member of the staff, nor one of the aristocratic guests. It was Miss Clara Ventham, a young woman of 24 with auburn hair, steady grey eyes, and a disposition inclined toward observation. She stood near the French doors overlooking the lawn, nursing a half-finished glass of champagne. Her companion, a sandy-haired man with a charming but somewhat strained smile, gestured animatedly at something he had said mere seconds before. Clara had not heard a word of it. "Yes, quite," she murmured absently, her gaze drifting across the ballroom. She had caught sight of her cousin, Alexandra Lexie Harfield, appearing at the top of the staircase like a vision. Dressed in a pale blue gown with delicate beadwork, Lexie seemed to glow under the chandelier's reflection. She was smiling at someone below, a mysterious, private smile, a smile meant for one person only. Clara's breath caught. It was the same smile Lexie had worn an hour earlier, when she had taken Clara aside and whispered, "There's something I must tell you tonight, something important." But before Clara could press her further, Lady Velacourt had whisked Lexie away to greet arriving guests. Now, Clara watched as Lexie descended the stairs with that secretive smile. And then, quite suddenly, Lexie disappeared. Not physically, not yet. But the smile vanished first, wiped clean as though by an unseen hand. Lexie halted mid-step, her posture stiffening. Her eyes widened ever so slightly. Someone had stepped forward from behind one of the columns. Clara could not see who it was. She did see Lexie's reaction. Her color drained, her lips parted, and she wavered. The orchestra swelled at that very moment, drowning any spoken words, and in the time it took Clara to blink, Lexie was gone. Not down the stairs, not into the crowd, simply no longer there. "Clara, you look as though you've seen a ghost," her companion joked lightly. "No," Clara whispered, eyes fixed on the now empty staircase. "I think I've seen someone disappear." By 10 o'clock, murmurs crept through the ballroom. Saint-Étoile, Velacourt tried valiantly to maintain the gala's cheery atmosphere, but whispers spread like wind among dry leaves. "Have you seen Miss Harfield? She was meant to open the charity auction. She's probably slipped away with one of her suitors. No, she was summoned. Did you see? Someone called her over." At 11, the manor doors were thrown open, admitting Inspector Gerald Upton of the Berkshire Constabulary. He was a broad, heavy man with a bulldog's jowl, and the patient, slightly harassed expression of one accustomed to dealing with wealthy people's dramas. "Miss Alexandra Harfield is missing," he announced to Lady Velacourt in a low voice that nevertheless carried to more ears than intended. Lady Velacourt, tall, elegant, and usually composed to a degree bordering on sculpture, clasped her gloved hands tightly. "Inspector, please, there must be some mistake. We received a telephone call from a guest, Miss Ventham. Says her cousin vanished from the upper landing and hasn't been seen since." Clara stepped forward. She looked pale but determined. "She did vanish, Inspector. I saw her moments before, and she was frightened." Frightened, Upton repeated. Frightened by what or whom? Clara hesitated. Someone followed her or approached her. I couldn't see who. Upton grunted, skeptical, overburdened, and already preparing to dismiss the matter as a foolish misunderstanding. Well, young ladies at parties wander off, especially when admirers are. But before he finished, a second disturbance erupted. A footman stumbled into the ballroom, white as linen. My lady, Inspector, please, you should come at once. We've found something on the east terrace. Lady Delacourt swayed. Upton squared his thick shoulders. The crowd pressed in closer, but only Clara whispered so softly she barely heard herself. I knew it. I knew she was in danger. 3 minutes later, under a canopy of lanterns and moonlight, the gathered group beheld the object found on the terrace, a silk wrap, pale blue to match Lexi's gown. Its beading had snagged on a piece of wrought iron railing. At its center was a single dark stain, fresh, glistening, unmistakable. Inspector Upton crouched, touched the stain with a handkerchief, and let out a grim breath. Blood, Lady Delacourt gasped. Clara covered her mouth. And Miss Harfield? Upton demanded. The footman swallowed. She's nowhere to be found. We searched the gardens. There's been no sign of her since she left the ballroom. Clara spoke again, her voice tight with urgency. Inspector, you do not understand. She did not leave willingly. Something happened. Someone must have... Indeed, Upton said, rising to his full, intimidating height, which is why I shall be requesting assistance from someone entirely too familiar with the secrets of this human heart. Lady Delacourt blinked. Assistance? Yes, Upton said gruffly. A man in London, foreign chap. Extraordinary nose for trouble. He turned toward the manor as though to fetch a telephone. Name of Hercule Poirot. Far from Delacourt Manor, in a London flat meticulously arranged and perfectly symmetrical, a small, fastidious Belgian was stirring his cup of hot chocolate, unaware that a young woman with a secret had vanished in the moonlit dark, and that soon he would be drawn into an affair unlike any other. Inspector Upton made the call shortly after midnight. The gala had been formally dissolved, the guests shepherded to their cars under the uneasy authority of uniformed officers who now populated the manicured grounds like grave markers. A cold wind swept across the terrace where Lexi's wrap still hung, the silk trembling faintly as though stirred by unseen fingers. Inside the manor, Clara sat at the edge of a chaise in the blue drawing-room, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The events of the night played before her eyes, again and again. The smile, the sudden shock in Lexi's expression, the vanished figure near the column. She could not shake the certainty that Lexi had been beckoned, or warned, or threatened. Lady Delacourt paced the length of the carpet with dignified agitation. She was a woman who prided herself on composure, but now her mask had begun to crack. Missing, she muttered under her breath. At my event, my own goddaughter. What will the papers say? Inspector Upton cleared his throat pointedly. My lady, public scandal is the least of our concerns. What matters now is locating Miss Harfield. We must not assume the worst, Lady Delacourt said, though her voice wavered. Clara lifted her chin. No, we must assume precisely what is most probable. Something happened to her, something dreadful. Upton regarded Clara with a mixture of respect and impatience. We shall investigate every inch of the grounds, but I'll tell you this much. There were nearly 200 guests here tonight. That is a great many statements to collect, and a great many half-truths to sort through. His brows drew together. Poirot cannot arrive until morning. Until then, we begin with the people closest to Miss Harfield. Clara felt a knot tighten inside her. Her family and her acquaintances. Anyone she spoke with tonight. Anyone who sought her out. He paused. according to Lady Velacourt, she was quite the popular young woman. A hush settled over the room, thick as velvet. Lady Velacourt stopped pacing. "Perhaps too popular," she said quietly. Upton looked up. "Meaning?" "Meaning she attracted devotion easily, and jealousy far more easily still." Clara shifted, uneasy. Lexie had admirers, yes. But she was kind, gentle. People gravitated to her. "People gravitate to flames as well," Lady Velacourt replied. Before Clara could ask what she meant, the sound of voices approached from the corridor. The door opened to reveal 2 officers escorting the first of the night's interviewees. Mr. Adrian Forsyth entered with a languid, almost feline grace. Tall, dark-haired, impeccably dressed, he possessed the polished charm of a man who navigated high society with ease, and the casual arrogance of someone used to being adored. He removed his gloves with slow deliberation. "Inspector," he greeted coolly. "I hope this won't take long. I was told you wished to speak with me." "Sit," Upton ordered. Forsyth arched an eyebrow but complied. Clara watched him with a restrained intensity. She had seen him with Lexie earlier that evening, leaning close, whispering something that had made Lexie laugh and blush. Clara did not trust him. She doubted many women truly did. "Your connection to Miss Harfield?" Upton asked without preamble. Forsyth crossed one leg over the other, exuding a confidence that bordered on insolence. "We are friends. Good friends. Only friends. Inspector," he sighed, "if you wish to ask whether I was in love with her, the answer is no. Was I fond of her? Yes. Did I wish her well? Naturally." Lady Velacourt scoffed. "You pursued her relentlessly, Adrian. Everyone saw—" A flicker of annoyance crossed Forsyth's face. "Admiration is hardly a crime, Eugenia." Clara leaned forward. "Were you with her tonight?" His eyes moved to Clara. Cool and assessing. "I spoke with her briefly after dinner. She excused herself, said she had a headache. That was around 9. Clara's pulse quickened. 9. But I saw her on the staircase at 9:30. Forsyth blinked slowly. "Did you? Then she must have felt better." His tone was perfectly light, but something in his expression was not. "Did she mention speaking to anyone else?" Clara pressed. "No." He offered a thin smile. "Miss Harfield was hardly required to report her conversations to me." Upton scribbled a note. "Where were you at 9:30? "I was with Lady Havisham near the orchestra. Many guests can confirm." Clara studied him. "And yet you seem extraordinarily calm for someone whose friend has vanished." Forsyth's smile hardened. "Miss Ventham, hysteria does not aid an investigation, and I expect Miss Harfield will be found in due course." "Alive?" Clara whispered. Forsyth did not answer. Upton dismissed him, and Forsyth rose with smooth disdain, offering a curt nod before leaving the room. When the door closed, Clara exhaled shakily. "He is hiding something." "Perhaps," Upton admitted. "But he has an alibi, and a solid one if witnesses verify it." Lady Velacourt folded her arms. "The man is capable of darker impulses than he displays. Mark my words." The night deepened. More suspects were brought in. An anxious maid who had seen nothing, a nervous young man who insisted Lexie had promised him a dance, a society woman who claimed Lexie had snubbed her twice that evening. Each added fragments of detail, yet none formed a coherent picture. Call it instinct or something sharper, but Clara felt the story tightening around them, threads drawing inward. Sometime near 2 in the morning, as the last of the guests was questioned, a carriage approached the manor gates. Its lamps cast twin circles of gold on the gravel. Clara moved toward the window and her breath caught. A small, impeccably dressed man stepped out, adjusting his cuffs with precise care. His silhouette was unmistakable, his posture exacting, his presence quietly electrifying. Hercule Poirot had arrived before dawn. Poirot entered Velacour Manor with the quiet assurance of a man who expected the world to be exactly as he left it. Neat, ordered, symmetrical. His polished shoes clicked softly on the marble floor. He paused only long enough to remove his hat and gloves, handing them to a wide-eyed footman as though entrusting him with delicate treasure. Inspector Upton stepped forward, clearly relieved. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming so promptly." Poirot inclined his head. "But of course, when a young lady disappears in the night, it is not a matter one treats with casualness, n'est-ce pas? And you say there is blood." His dark eyes swept the grand entrance hall, noting details with effortless precision. Already something is amiss. The house itself, it is trembling. Clara, who had been waiting by the drawing-room door, approached hesitantly. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming." He studied her with keen gentleness. "You are Mademoiselle Ventham, yes? The cousin of the missing Miss Harfield?" "Yes." "You have seen something that troubles you," Poirot said softly. "This I can tell. Later, you shall tell me all. For now." He glanced toward the east terrace. "First, I wish to see where the tragedy began." The three walked through the dimly lit corridor leading to the terrace, their footsteps the only sound in the sleeping manor. Outside, the moon had dipped lower, but the silk wrap still clung to the railing like a ghost refusing to depart. Poirot approached it with delicate reverence. "Do not touch," he murmured, as though addressing Upton's impatient stance rather than the wrap itself. He leaned close, examining the beadwork, the thread, the small tear where it had caught, and finally the stain at its center. He straightened. "This blood, it is fresh, less than 3 hours old." Clara shivered. "But Lexie hasn't been found." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "No, she has not. But, mademoiselle, do not leap to conclusions. Blood is not always death. It is sometimes struggle, sometimes warning, sometimes trickery." Inspector Upton frowned. "Trickery?" Poirot offered a small, mysterious smile. "Patience, mon ami. You English police, always you hope the world is literal. But crime," he tapped his temple lightly. "Crime is a work of imagination." He moved next to the iron railing, following it with his fingertips. Then he crouched, examining the terrace stones with meticulous care. "There," he said at last, pointing to a faint smear visible only when the lantern was held low. "Someone stepped in the blood, and the direction toward the garden path." Upton nodded to an officer. "Search pattern again. Start from that path. Expand toward the lake." Poirot held up a hand. "No, not the lake." He traced the faint track with narrowing eyes. "The steps. They are light at first, then heavier. Someone carried weight, but not all the way. Because here," he pointed farther along the path, where the smear abruptly ended. "They set her down or lost balance." Clara's breath hitched. "Poirot, do you think Lexie was injured, or worse?" "I think," he said quietly, "that someone wished to move her unseen, and someone panicked." This detail seemed to vibrate in the cold morning air. Poirot rose and dusted his hands delicately. "Now, Inspector, you will take me to the young man who was, how do you say, good friends with Mademoiselle Harfield." "Forsyth?" "Yes. The one with the face too handsome, the charm too polished. Always in such men there is the trouble." Clara blinked. "You noticed that already?" "I noticed everything already," Poirot said simply. "Come." They found Adrian Forsyth in the morning room, feigning ease by the fireplace. He was impeccably dressed despite the sleepless night, though his eyes betrayed something. Fatigue, or guilt, or something more complicated still. He straightened when he saw Poirot. "Ah, you must be the famous detective." Poirot gave a courteous nod. "You flatter me. And yet, it is not my fame you should fear, Monsieur Forsyth. It is my accuracy." Upton cleared his throat. "Forsyth, This is not a performance. Monsieur Poirot is here to question you. Poirot stepped closer, folding his hands neatly. Monsieur Forsyth, you were one of the last to speak with Mademoiselle Harfield. For the 100th time, Forsyth said with forced calm. We spoke briefly earlier in the evening, that is all. Ah, but you are clever, Poirot replied lightly. You say earlier, so you may avoid the distinction of when. Tell me, did you speak to her after dinner or before her sudden disappearance? Forsyth stiffened. I told the inspector. Poirot's expression did not change, but something sharp entered his tone. Your answer was imprecise. You spoke with her after dinner, yes? Yet you did not go near the staircase at 9:30. No. And yet you seemed unsurprised when told she vanished. Forsyth's jaw tightened. What exactly are you implying, Monsieur Poirot? That you lie poorly, Poirot said gently. Upton glanced between them, startled. Clara watched, breathless. Forsyth's composure cracked. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. I haven't lied about anything. I had no reason to. Poirot tilted his head. But you had a reason to seek her attention, a reason to be jealous if she smiled at another, a reason to follow her when she excused herself. Forsyth's voice rose. I did not follow her. Poirot studied the man's stance, the trembling of one hand, the involuntary clench of his jaw. No, Poirot murmured at last. You did not follow her, but you know who did. Forsyth went still. Upton stepped closer. Forsyth? What aren't you telling us? The silence stretched painfully. Forsyth's eyes dropped. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. All right, he whispered. I saw someone go after her, but I didn't want to get involved. Poirot nodded slowly, as though confirming a truth he had already known. And the someone? He asked gently. Forsyth swallowed hard. It was Lady Velacourt's son. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The room itself seemed to recoil from Forsyth's confession, the air tightening like a wire drawn too taut. Clara stared at him, hardly breathing. Poirot, by contrast, merely lowered his lashes in a gesture of quiet contemplation. Lady Velacourt's son, Poirot repeated softly. Julian. Forsyth nodded once. Inspector Upton exhaled in a slow, incredulous rush. Are you telling me Julian Velacourt followed Miss Harfield from the ballroom? Yes, Forsyth said, wiping his palms against his trousers. I saw him step out from behind the column just as she reached the staircase landing. Clara's eyes widened. Then he could be the last person who saw her alive. Forsyth flinched. I didn't say that. No, monsieur, Poirot agreed mildly. You did not say it, but you believe it. Forsyth looked away, as though ashamed of the thought. Poirot watched him with quiet interest. Tell us, Poirot said gently. What was in the expression of Monsieur Julien Velacourt when he followed Mademoiselle Harfield? Was it anger, fear, jealousy? What emotion betrays a man in such a moment? Forsyth hesitated. Words did not come easily now. He struggled against them as though they were caught in his throat. He looked determined, Forsyth finally managed, as if he wanted answers from her. Upton's eyes narrowed. Why would Julian want answers? Forsyth's laugh was empty. Because Lexie had something on him. Clara stiffened. Something on him? What do you mean? But Forsyth shook his head. I don't know the details. Only that she hinted at something once. Something she discovered about Julian. She refused to say what it was. Poirot's gaze flicked to Clara. And you, mademoiselle? Earlier you said mademoiselle. Harfield wished to tell you something important tonight. Clara swallowed hard. Yes. Before the gala began, she asked if we could speak privately later. She said she'd uncovered something she wasn't sure how to handle. And did she mention Julian Velacourt by name? I don't know, not clearly. but she looked troubled when she spoke of him at dinner. She never said why. Poirot absorbed this in silence. His mind, Clara sensed, had already moved several steps ahead. Upton motioned to the door. "Forsyth, stay available. If you're lying—" Forsyth held up both hands, weary and defensive. "I'm not. Believe me, Inspector, I liked Lexie, but some people in this house had far more complicated ties to her than I ever did." Poirot's brow arched at that, but he said nothing more as Forsyth was escorted out. The moment the door latched, Lady Velacourt's son became the new gravitational center of the investigation. Clara turned to Upton. "Julian must be questioned, immediately." Upton nodded. "Agreed." Poirot tilted his head slightly. "Where is Monsieur Julian at present?" Lady Velacourt herself answered from the doorway, her voice cool and crystalline. "Julian is in his rooms, asleep." The three turned sharply toward her. "Asleep most convenient," Poirot murmured. "I will not have you insinuating my son is involved in harm," Lady Velacourt snapped, though her tight grip on the door frame betrayed her own disquiet. Julian had no quarrel with Alexandra. He was fond of her, quite fond. Poirot approached her with gentle courtesy. "Madame, when a young lady disappears, fondness becomes a matter of motive or madness. Forgive my bluntness." She bristled, but she did not forbid the inquiry. "Very well, question him. But this is my home, Monsieur Poirot. I will not have it treated as though—" "A crime occurred within it," Poirot finished quietly. "Yes, madame. That is exactly why I'm here." Lady Velacourt's lips tightened, but she stepped aside. Julian Velacourt's rooms were situated along the west wing, past portraits of ancestors, whose stern expressions seemed to judge all who passed beneath them. As they approached, Clara felt a prickle of unease. Something about the silent corridor felt wrong, too still, too expectant. Upton knocked sharply on Julian's door. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Lady Velacourt, who had followed at a distance, called out, "Julian, darling, open the door." Silence. Upton exchanged a grim glance with Poirot. "We're going in." He signaled an officer, who forced the lock with a swift, practiced motion. The door swung open. The bedroom was empty, sheets half rumpled, wardrobe doors ajar, a window slightly open, curtains stirring with the early morning draught. Poirot crossed the room with deliberate care, his gaze moving from the unmade bed to the scattered papers on the desk to the faint imprint of damp soil on the carpet beneath the window. "Inspector," he said softly. Upton stepped beside him and looked down. "Mud." Poirot nodded. "Fresh mud from the gardens. Monsieur Julien left the house during the night." Clara felt cold spreading down her spine. "He fled." Lady Velacourt swayed, clutching the bedpost. "My son. Why would he flee unless—" Poirot raised a hand. "Do not finish the thought, madame. We do not yet know what he knows, or what he fears." Upton's jaw set. "Issue a search for him. He's somewhere on the estate." Poirot looked once more at the muddy trail. "Non, Inspector. He's not merely somewhere on the estate. He is following a path, and that path is the same one used to move Mademoiselle Harfield." Clara felt her heart stop. "You mean he went after her? After Lexie?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with chilling clarity. "I mean, mademoiselle," he said softly, "that the first truth of this case has just revealed itself. Monsieur Julien knows what happened on the terrace, and he has gone out to face it." The next moment, a shout echoed from outside. An officer's voice, breathless and alarmed. "Inspector, Poirot, we've found something near the orchard. Hurry!" Poirot did not run. Poirot never ran, but the urgency in his precise steps told Clara one unmistakable thing. Whatever they were about to discover would change the investigation entirely. The orchard lay in a pale wash of early morning light, the sky only just beginning to soften from black to blue. Clara hurried alongside the others, her breath rising in delicate white clouds. Trees stood in regimented rows, their branches whispering faintly in the wind, and at first glance nothing seemed amiss. It was too peaceful, wrongly peaceful. An officer waved them over urgently. "Here, this way, by the old apple tree." Poirot reached the spot first, kneeling with a precision that made the moment feel strangely ceremonial. The earth was disturbed, fresh soil overturned, leaves crushed, and near the base of the tree, half hidden beneath a cluster of fallen branches, lay a glove. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "That's Lexi's. I know it." The glove was soft, cream-colored leather, delicately stitched, far too refined to belong to anyone else. Poirot lifted it with the utmost care. "There is blood on the cuff," he observed quietly. "Not much, but enough to suggest injury." Inspector Upton straightened, scanning the orchard. If Julien came this way, maybe he dropped it. Poirot shook his head. "No, the placement, it is deliberate. Someone wished it to be found." Clara felt her pulse race. "But why? To mislead us? To guide us?" Poirot corrected gently. "A clue left in haste, perhaps, or left by one who hoped we would understand." Upton frowned. "Meaning what, exactly?" Poirot didn't answer immediately. He studied the ground, tracing the faint impressions in the soil, footprints, overlapping, inconsistent, leading deeper into the orchard, but then veering abruptly toward a stone wall bordering the estate's western edge. "Two sets of steps," Poirot murmured. "One dragging slightly." "Dragging?" Clara echoed, fear tightening her voice. "Yes," Poirot said, rising, as though one person were supporting or pulling another. "And see, one set of prints is deeper." He pointed to the indentation. "That could be a man carrying weight, but the other set, lighter, inconsistent, perhaps made by someone unsteady, wounded even." Clara's heart clenched. Then Lexi was alive when she reached the orchard. Poirot's gaze softened, but he did not contradict her. Inspector Upton gestured for officers to widen their search. "Follow the trail. If Julien was involved, we'll find evidence." An officer called out again, not with alarm this time, but confusion. "Inspector, over here, on the wall." They approached swiftly. A section of the old stone wall, weathered and moss-lined, bore a disturbance. Flecks of dirt, a loose stone, scuff marks as though someone had climbed over in great haste. But what caught Clara's eye was a scrap of fabric snagged on the jagged edge. Pale blue, shimmering faintly. Poirot removed it with delicate fingers. Clara whispered, "Her dress." "It matches the gown she wore last night," Poirot confirmed. "She climbed over, or was made to." Upton's brows knit. "But why escape the manor grounds? If someone wanted to hide her, the estate is enormous. Why take her beyond the wall?" Poirot's eyes narrowed in thought. Unless the person guiding her, or pursuing her, was heading to a rendezvous, a place outside the manor where prying eyes would not see. Lady Velacourt, who had been watching from several paces back, gave a small gasp. "There is an old caretaker's cottage on the other side of the wall, disused for years. Julien used to play there as a child." Poirot's gaze flicked sharply to her. "Madame, that is most important. Why did you not say earlier?" She bristled, though the colour had drained from her face. "Because I did not think it relevant. The cottage is derelict. No one goes there." Poirot gave a small, tight nod. "Then we go there now." The party moved toward the gap in the wall, following the telltale signs. Clara climbed carefully, her breath catching as she imagined Lexi doing the same. Terrified, injured, desperate. On the other side, the land dipped into a gentle hollow where the caretaker's cottage sat, crooked and half swallowed by wild growth. The roof sagged, ivy strangling the chimneys, windows dulled by dust. It looked like a house abandoned by time itself, but Poirot's voice was calm. "Observe," A footprint behind the door. Fresh. Upton forced the warped door open, and a soft groan of old wood filled the air. The interior smelled of damp and abandonment. Dust lay thick across the floor, except for one narrow, disturbed path that led toward the small back room. Poirot motioned for quiet. They followed the path, hearts pounding. The back room was empty, yet not entirely. A blanket had been dragged from a rotting cot, placed on the floor. The dust here was heavily disrupted, as though someone had knelt, perhaps lain down. And on the edge of the blanket lay a glass vial. Small, clear, unmistakably modern in contrast to the ruin around it. Poirot lifted it. Inside were traces of a pale residue. Clara stared. "What is that?" Poirot did not answer immediately, though his eyes darkened with knowing. Upton took a step closer. "Poirot, what does this mean?" "It means," Poirot said softly, "that someone brought Mademoiselle Harfield here, and someone else came after her." He held up the vial between two fingers. "This is not medicine. It is chloroform." Clara's knees went weak. Chloroform? Then she was unconscious. "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, "or someone meant her to be." Upton exhaled sharply. "We need to find Julian. If he was involved—" But Poirot interrupted with a faint shake of his head. "No, Inspector. Julian did not take Mademoiselle Harfield here." Clara blinked. "How can you know?" Poirot pointed to the disturbed dust, the faint impression of a boot heel, the torn edge of the blanket. He pointed to the vial, the careful placement of objects, the absence of certain others, and then he pointed to the window, shattered on one edge. "Because, mademoiselle, he fought here." Clara's heart dropped. "Julian." Poirot nodded. "He fought someone, and lost." A breathless quiet fell over them. Clara whispered, "Then where is he now?" Poirot looked out toward the trees, where faint footprints continued into the thick brush beyond the cottage. "Julian," he said softly, "was taken." Upton stared. "Taken? By whom?" Poirot turned back to them, eyes sharper than a blade. "By the same person who took Miss Harfield." The realization settled over the cottage like a suffocating veil. Clara felt her breath catch, her pulse thundering in her ears. Julian, taken? The thought rattled her, for it meant everything they feared was no longer theoretical. Someone was orchestrating each step with precision. Someone who had taken Lexie, and had now taken Julian as well. Inspector Upton swore under his breath. "If Julian was taken, then this is bigger than we thought. Poirot, what are we dealing with?" Poirot crouched near the broken window, running 2 fingers lightly along the jagged glass. His expression was grave, contemplative. "We deal with a mind that is careful, Inspector. Careful, but not perfect. See the pattern of the break? Someone entered through here after the struggle inside had already begun." Clara stepped closer. Meaning there were 2 assailants. Poirot shook his head. "No, only one attacker, 2 victims. One attacker who entered after disorienting Julian. The window was their entry, not their exit." Upton frowned. But why break in from outside when the door wasn't even locked? "To create an illusion," Poirot said simply. "To make us believe escape happened through here. But no, this too is designed. False leads scattered like breadcrumbs." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "But why Julian? Why harm him?" Poirot paused. He turned the small vial in his fingers, thoughtfully. "Because Julian Velacour came too close to the truth." Upton's eyes widened. "Poirot, are you suggesting Julian found something, some clue Lexie uncovered?" Poirot nodded. "Perhaps he followed the trail she left. Perhaps he confronted the kidnapper. Or perhaps—" He paused, eyes drifting to the disturbed dust on the floor. "Perhaps Julian was never meant to be part of this at all, but became collateral when he arrived unexpectedly." Clara swallowed. Poirot, what if Lexie left the glove in the orchard? What if she was trying to leave us a trail? Poirot smiled gently. Ah, mademoiselle, the thought has occurred to me. Miss Harfield is a clever young woman, and fear can sharpen instinct. I believe she did leave it, deliberately. Upton stepped forward. If Lexie was conscious, it means she was being moved under threat, and Julian tried to intervene. His voice hardened. Let's not waste time. We follow the tracks. But Poirot placed a hand on his arm. Patience, Inspector. The tracks continue toward the thicket, yes, but the ground grows soft there. Footprints vanish. His gaze drifted toward the horizon. We must consider the broader picture. Clara's breath trembled. Poirot, do you think they're still alive? His eyes softened. Yes, I do. For now. It wasn't comfort, but it wasn't despair either. Poirot straightened, adjusting his cuffs. Let us return to the manor. There are questions yet unanswered there, and answers waiting to be uncovered. As they walked back across the uneven ground, Clara noticed Poirot's gaze drifting periodically toward the distant tree line. He was assembling something in his mind, a pattern she could not yet see. The manor felt colder upon their return, as though the walls themselves sensed the darkness encroaching outside. Lady Velacourt paced the drawing-room in a state of controlled panic, her composure wavering like a candle flame in a draught. "Where is my son?" she demanded the moment Poirot entered. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "Julian has been taken." Lady Velacourt staggered, catching the back of a chair. "Taken? By whom? Why? This is madness." "Non," Poirot interrupted softly. "This is deliberate. Someone planned this. Miss Harfield's disappearance was no spontaneous act. It was orchestrated, and when Julian went after her, he complicated the plan." Lady Velacourt's breath came in ragged pulls. "Poirot, if anything happens to him—" "We will find him," Poirot said. His tone, though calm, carried a quiet authority that stilled the air. Clara stepped forward. "Lady Velacourt, there is something Lexie may have discovered about Julian. A secret." Lady Velacourt looked up sharply. "A secret?" Poirot watched her closely. "Madame, what troubles did your son carry? Did he have debts, disputes, entanglements?" Her lips parted, and for an instant Clara saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also guilt. "Julian—" She hesitated, then sank into a chair. "Julian was troubled lately, withdrawn. He cancelled engagements, avoided friends. I asked him what weighed on him, but he always brushed me aside." Poirot nodded slowly. "And Miss Harfield?" "She asked after him just a week ago," Lady Velacourt admitted. "Said she was concerned. Said she feared he'd become involved in something he could not handle." Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Upton. "You see, Inspector, already the shape of the thing becomes clearer." Upton scratched his brow. "I'm not seeing any shape, Poirot." "But I am," Poirot murmured. "Two young people, one with a secret, the other with knowledge of it, both targeted in one night. This is not about jealousy or romance. It is about silence." Clara's blood chilled. Someone wanted Lexie silent. "And when Julian understood too much," Poirot said, "they wanted him silent as well." A heavy quiet settled in the room. Then, from the corridor, hurried footsteps approached. A constable appeared, breathless, face pale. "Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, you must come at once. We've received a message." Poirot's brows lifted. "A message? From whom?" The constable held out a folded piece of paper, hands trembling. It was left at the manor gates. No signature. Upton snatched it, unfolding it quickly. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Upton looked up, his face drained of colour. "It says," he whispered, "do not search for them. The girl lives. For now." Clara felt her knees buckle. Poirot reached for the note, reading it with the quiet intensity of a surgeon examining a fatal wound. His expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened with something fierce, something undeniable. The game, Clara realized, had changed. No longer a disappearance, now a threat, and somewhere out in the shadows, Lexie and Julian were running out of time. Inspector Upton passed the threatening note to Poirot with visible reluctance, as though fearing it might burn his fingers. Poirot accepted it delicately, smoothing the fold lines with the tips of his immaculate gloves. Clara watched him anxiously, every nerve straining for his reaction. He read it once, then again. His expression did not change, but something inside him sharpened. Clara felt it rather than saw it, like the tightening of a wire. "This," Poirot murmured, "is most instructive." Upton raised an incredulous brow. "Instructive? It's a warning." Poirot shook his head gently. Warnings arrive when kidnappers wish to buy time. "This," he tapped the paper, "is not a warning. It is a performance." Clara blinked. "A performance?" Poirot gestured to the neat handwriting, the careful choice of phrasing. "The girl lives. For now." These are not the words of someone who fears discovery. They are the words of someone who wants us to know they are in control. Lady Velacourt sank into a chair. "Poirot, what are they doing with my son? Why take him as well?" Poirot approached her slowly, his voice soft. "Madame, Julian stumbled into a dangerous design, but he is not the architect of it. That much is clear." Upton folded his arms. "So we're dealing with someone calculating, someone confident, and someone close," Poirot added quietly. "Very close. They knew the manor's alcoves, the orchard path, the abandoned cottage. They knew the timing of the gala. They could move unnoticed." Clara's breath caught. "Someone who was here tonight." Poirot turned, meeting her gaze. "Just so, mademoiselle." The weight of that truth pressed into the room like a storm cloud. Every guest, every servant, every familiar face suddenly seemed more threatening. Upton rubbed his temples. "If we're dealing with someone inside these walls, we've got a much bigger problem. They could be listening right now." "Precisely why," Poirot replied. "We must examine the list of guests, not for alibis, but for connections." Clara stepped forward. "Connections? To Lexie? Or Julian?" "Both," Poirot answered. "And more. To each other. To the estate. To whatever secret Mademoiselle Harfield uncovered. Let us begin with those who stood to lose something if she spoke." Lady Velacourt stiffened. "And you suspect my circle?" Poirot gave a slight formal bow. "Madame, I suspect every circle until the circle tightens." A footman entered hesitantly just then, carrying a silver tray with 3 folded sheets of paper. "Inspector Upton, sir. We've compiled the initial list you requested. Guests still inside the manor, those who left early, and staff assignments." Poirot accepted the sheets with polite gratitude and spread them across a writing desk, arranging them with exacting care. Clara and Inspector Upton gathered beside him as he scanned the columns. "Lady Havisham," Poirot murmured, "a widow with investments tied to the Velacourt estate. Mr. Bellamy, he left at 10:30. Miss Ada Harrington, a cousin of the family, prone to jealousy. Sir Kenneth Rowe, former suitor of Miss Harfield." Clara frowned. "Rowe? Lexie never mentioned him." "Because she refused. His proposal 3 years ago. And he has not forgiven her," Lady Velacourt said stiffly. Poirot made a soft humming sound of interest. "Unrequited affections produce both passion and spite, but let us not leap." He turned to the staff list. "Monsieur Peters, the footman. Miss Drake, the maid. Mr. Lewis, the groundskeeper." Poirot paused. "Groundskeeper," he repeated softly. "Who must know the orchard paths intimately?" Upton leaned in. "Suspicious?" "Not yet." Poirot's eyes flicked back to the note on the table. But let us consider another thing. This message, left at the manor gates. Who could leave such a note without being seen? Someone familiar to the guardhouse. Someone unnoticed. Staff, Clara whispered. Or, Poirot corrected softly, someone who has permission to pass freely. Lady Velacourt's face blanched. Poirot, surely you are not suggesting someone in my household. Poirot raised a calming hand. Madame, suggestion is not accusation. We merely observe and deduce. His eyes drifted to the final list, guests who had left early. And there, near the bottom, one name drew his attention like a magnet. Adrian Forsyth. Clara startled. But he said he stayed until after 9:30. Poirot nodded, and yet the log shows he departed at 10:15. Upton's jaw tightened. He lied about his timing. Poirot tapped the paper with a gleam of triumph. Ah, Inspector, but note, 10:15 is after Miss Harfield vanished, after the first search began, after the terrace was discovered. Clara's heart thudded. You think he saw something, or someone? Poirot smiled faintly. Monsieur Forsyth sees many things. What he chooses to reveal is another matter. A sharp knock interrupted them. An officer entered hastily. Inspector, we've found Mr. Forsyth. Poirot's brows lifted. How interesting. He was discovered on the north lawn, the officer continued, trying to leave the estate grounds. Clara felt a chill. Trying to flee? Poirot gathered the lists neatly, smoothing the edges. Or trying to avoid a second conversation with Hercule Poirot. Lady Velacourt pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Bring him in, she whispered. Moments later, Adrian Forsyth was escorted into the room, dishevelled now, a stark contrast to the elegant man they had interviewed earlier. His hair was wind-tousled, his tie askew. He seemed anxious, cornered. Upton stepped forward. Forsyth, you lied about when you left the gala. Forsyth swallowed. I didn't mean to deceive you. Poirot's voice was gentle but unyielding. Then tell us. Why did you really leave at 10:15? Forsyth's gaze darted between them, panic rising like a tide. I didn't know what to do, he whispered. I saw something. Something I should not have seen. Clara leaned forward. What did you see? Forsyth's voice trembled. I saw Julian in the orchard, he said, with someone wearing a dark cloak. Tall, a man, I think. They were arguing. Poirot's eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. And the face of this man, you saw it? Forsyth hesitated. No, he whispered. I only heard one thing. One sentence. Upton barked, what sentence? Forsyth shut his eyes, reliving it. The man said, she knows too much. And now, you do as well. Clara's blood turned to ice. Poirot stood very still, and in the silence that followed, every piece of the night seemed to shift into a new and far more dangerous shape. The words hung in the air like frost, and for a moment no one dared breathe. Poirot's expression did not shift, but Clara saw the faint tightening at the corners of his eyes, a subtle sign that the words had struck true. Inspector Upton stepped closer to Forsyth, his voice sharp. You're certain of what you heard, word for word? Forsyth nodded, though his composure faltered. I didn't imagine it. They were speaking in low tones, but that phrase, it chilled me. It was as if the man knew Julian had uncovered something he shouldn't have. Poirot inclined his head thoughtfully. And after this moment, what did Julian do? Forsyth exhaled shakily. He stepped back, looked shaken. Then he ran deeper into the orchard. The cloaked man followed. I thought it was a lover's quarrel or some family dispute. I didn't want to involve myself. Clara flinched. But if you had... Poirot lifted a gentle hand. Non, mademoiselle. Recriminations do not serve us. Monsieur Forsyth acted in fear, not malice. Fear, he added softly, is a powerful motivator in this affair. Upton cleared his throat. So this cloaked figure, Some unknown man confronted Julian because of what Lexie discovered, and then abducted both him and Miss Harfield. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back and walked a slow, thoughtful circle. It is possible. But let us examine the facts with order and method, yes? Miss Harfield found a secret. Julian learned of it. Both were taken, and now we receive a message designed to intimidate. Lady Velacourt, pale but composed, leaned heavily against the mantel. Poirot, I must ask, do you believe my son is alive? Poirot turned to her with an expression of grave sincerity. Madame, if harm had been intended immediately, there would be no need for elaborate concealment. I believe your son lives. Her breath left her in a fragile sigh. Poirot continued, but for how long depends on uncovering the truth. And swiftly, Upton folded his arms. Then we need to identify the cloaked man. Lady Velacourt, does anyone fit that description among the guests? Before she could answer, Poirot shook his head. No. In a crowd such as last night, a dark cloak is anonymity itself. Anyone could don such a garment. But the height, tall, this narrows possibilities. Clara stepped beside him. And the voice. Forsyth recognized it. Forsyth stiffened. I never said that. You did not need to, Poirot replied softly. When you repeated the sentence, your tone shifted. You were unconsciously mimicking the cadence of the speaker. You have heard him before. Forsyth paled. I don't know. Non, monsieur. Poirot interrupted gently but firmly. You do know. Your mind refuses to accept it, but your memory, it remembers. Silence fell, thick and trembling. Clara felt herself drawn taut with expectancy. Finally, Forsyth whispered, it sounded like someone accustomed to commanding others. A man used to being obeyed. Poirot nodded. Go on. Forsyth swallowed. A man with authority, with presence. His gaze flicked toward Lady Velacourt's direction, then snapped away quickly as though guilty for even looking. Lady Velacourt's spine straightened. Are you implying? Forsyth raised both hands defensively. No, not Lady Velacourt, never her, but someone around her. Someone who believes he has the right to move in the shadows. Poirot stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Monsieur Forsyth, names are not daggers. They will not cut you. Speak plainly. But before Forsyth could respond, a sudden peal of thunder shook the window panes. Rain began to lash the manor, a sharp, relentless drumming that seemed to echo the rising tension. Poirot turned toward the sound. Ah, the storm arrives earlier than expected. This changes things. Upton frowned. Changes what? Poirot gestured toward the landscape disappearing under sheets of rain. Tracks, Inspector. Footprints. Any traces our kidnapper left in the orchard, along the walls, near the cottage, they will wash away. Clara's chest tightened. Then time is running out. Poirot nodded solemnly. It was already running. Now it is sprinting. Upton slammed his palm against the table. What do you suggest we do next? Poirot paced slowly, the storm intensifying beyond the windows. Every flash of lightning illuminated his silhouette. Small, precise, purposeful. He stopped suddenly. We summon the guests. Clara blinked. Now? All of them? Poirot's voice lowered. Not all. Only those whose presence matters most. Those whose motives intertwine with Miss Harfield's discovery. Who are they? Upton asked. Poirot listed calmly. Sir Kenneth Rowe, Miss Ada Harrington, Lady Havisham, Mr. Bellamy, Mr. Forsyth. He turned. And one more. His eyes fixed on Lady Velacourt. She stiffened. Me. Poirot bowed his head slightly. You, madame, for your protection and your knowledge, are indispensable. A bolt of lightning cracked overhead, shaking the chandeliers. Upton nodded. I'll gather them. As he left, Poirot remained still, gazing out the rain-streaked window. Clara approached cautiously. "Poirot, do you already know?" she asked softly. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "I know this," he said. "The secret Miss Harfield discovered was not merely personal. It was powerful. And the one who fears its revelation is someone who has spent years cultivating a role. Someone who hides in plain sight." Clara's breath caught. "Poirot? Who?" He gave a faint, enigmatic smile. "In time, mademoiselle. First we gather them, then we listen, and then—" He placed a hand over his heart. "The little grey cells deliver the truth." The storm raged on, shadows trembling across the manor floor. Somewhere out in that darkness, Lexie and Julian still lived, and the clock, for all of them, was ticking. The storm intensified as the selected guests were summoned to the grand salon. Lightning fractured the sky in violent streaks, illuminating the room in brief, ghostly flashes. The guests entered with uneasy expressions, their silhouettes cast long and wavering across the marble floor. Clara stood near the window, watching them file in. Sir Kenneth Rowe, with his rigid, prideful posture. Miss Ada Harrington, with her tightly pursed lips. Lady Havisham, draped in pearls and indignation. Mr. Bellamy, pale as parchment. And Adrian Forsyth, whose earlier bravado had crumbled into quiet dread. Lady Velacourt took a seat, composed despite trembling hands. Poirot remained at the center of the room, a calm eye amid the chaos of storm and suspicion. His presence alone seemed to draw every shifting gaze back to him, every fretful question held in breathless suspension. When the last guest had been seated, Poirot began, his voice soft but carrying effortlessly over the thunder. "Mesdames et messieurs, I have asked you here because the disappearance of Miss Alexandra Harfield is no longer a mystery confined to chance or misfortune. It is a crime of design. A crime committed by someone among us." A palpable ripple of fear moved through the room. Sir Kenneth rose abruptly. "This is outrageous. You cannot suggest that any of us—" "Sit," Poirot said gently, "before indignation sweeps you away." The baronet hesitated, then sat, face flushed with anger. Poirot paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze drifting from one anxious face to another. "We begin with motive. Miss Harfield knew something dangerous, something she intended to reveal. For this reason, she was silenced." Lady Havisham scoffed lightly, though her fingers twitched with anxiety. "Silenced? You speak as though she were some political whistleblower. She was a charming girl, socially pleasant, hardly someone with enemies." Poirot stopped before her. "Ah, but charm is a double-edged sword, madame. It draws admirers and rivals, and when a charming girl possesses information that affects someone's reputation or prospects or financial stability, she becomes a threat." Lady Havisham stiffened. "A threat? To whom?" "Perhaps to someone facing ruin," Poirot suggested lightly. "Or someone desperate to hide a misdeed, or someone whose entire standing depends on maintaining a certain image." His gaze flicked toward Sir Kenneth Rowe. Rowe bristled. "If you're implying Miss Harfield's past rejection of me gives me reason to abduct her, you are mistaken. I hold myself above—" "But you hold yourself above everything," Ada Harrington muttered, "except your pride." Poirot gave a polite nod. "Pride is a powerful motive, yes. But jealousy alone does not create such elaborate planning." He turned to Miss Harrington, whose chin lifted defensively. "And you, mademoiselle, you harbored bitter sentiments toward Miss Harfield. Twice she refused to support your placement at Lady Velacourt's charity committee." Ada flushed crimson. "She made me look foolish, but I wouldn't—" "No," Poirot said with a slight shrug. "Not you. You lack the boldness, the method, the imagination." Ada's indignation deflated into confusion. Poirot moved on. "Mr. Bellamy." The man looked up, startled. Yes, I barely spoke to Miss Harfield. Precisely, Poirot said, which makes you an unlikely kidnapper, for this crime required familiarity, not distance. Bellamy sagged with relief. Poirot resumed his pacing. Thunder rolled, shaking the window panes. Then we come to you, Mr. Forsyth. Forsyth stiffened visibly. You withheld information, Poirot continued, yet you eventually confessed to seeing Julian Velacour in the orchard, speaking to a mysterious man. Forsyth swallowed. I told you everything I saw. I believe you, Poirot said warmly. But what you felt, that is where truth often hides. The room leaned forward, collectively holding breath. Fear, Poirot continued. You feared the cloaked man, because that voice, it belonged to someone powerful, someone who commanded obedience. Forsyth nodded once, trembling. Poirot turned toward Lady Velacourt. She stiffened. Madame, Julian was troubled. He feared someone. This you did not share with us earlier. Lady Velacourt's mouth tightened. I didn't realize it mattered. Oh, it matters greatly, Poirot said softly. For the one your son feared is the same one who hunted Miss Harfield. A bolt of lightning split the sky, revealing all the guests in stark, pale silhouettes. Poirot went on, his voice steady. Miss Harfield's secret. It concerned a financial matter, a falsified account, someone embezzling funds from Lady Velacourt's charity trust. A gasp rippled through the room. Poirot nodded. Yes, and who would have access to that trust? Who would be desperate to prevent discovery? Who would wear a cloak to conceal himself? Not from strangers, but from those who knew him well. His gaze slid once again across the guests, but now he spoke slowly, deliberately. There is only one among us who fits every detail. Clara felt her heart pounding. This was it, a truth coalescing in the air. Poirot turned toward the tall doors at the back of the salon. Inspector, he said softly, you may bring him in now. Upton opened the doors. 2 officers stepped inside, flanking a man whose very presence transformed the room's atmosphere. His shoulders broad, his gaze cold, his expression taut with calculated defiance. Clara felt her breath leave her. Mr. Lewis, Poirot said, voice unyielding, the groundskeeper. A stunned silence filled the room. Poirot stepped forward, his tone calm and measured. A man with access to the charity accounts, a man trusted implicitly by Lady Velacourt, a man who knows every corner of this estate, the orchard paths, the cottage, the walls, a man accustomed to giving commands to the junior staff, a man who feared Miss Harfield's discovery and silenced her. Lewis glared, jaw tight. You have no proof, he growled. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, but I do. A bolt of thunder boomed, and Poirot reached into his pocket. You left something at the cottage, something that proves you were there. Clara's heart thundered in her chest. What Poirot held was the truth poised to break open the night. Poirot's hand emerged slowly from his pocket, the room taut with collective breath. Clara leaned forward, heart pounding. Mr. Lewis did not move. He stood rigid, jaw clenched, but a faint tremor flickered at the corner of his eye. Poirot unfolded his fingers. Resting on his palm was a small brass button, ornate, polished once but now dulled by dirt and rain. Its crest, shaped like a stylized oak leaf, glinted faintly in the flicker of lightning. Lady Velacourt gasped. Why, that button belongs to the estate uniforms. Poirot nodded. Just so. Specifically the uniform of the groundskeeper. And you, Mr. Lewis, are the only one with the newer set, those tailored just 6 months ago. This button, he lifted it gently, was torn from your coat during the struggle inside the cottage. Lewis's nostrils flared. It proves nothing. Anyone could have... No, Poirot said softly. No. There was more. He slipped his other hand into his coat and revealed the small glass vial, the one found beside the blanket in the abandoned cottage. "This vial," Poirot continued, "contains traces of chloroform, and on its neck, just here." He pointed to a faint smear. "We found soil. The same rare, silver-coated potting soil used exclusively in the manor's greenhouse. Soil, monsieur, that only you had direct access to." A ripple of horror swept through the room. "Furthermore," Poirot said, "Mademoiselle Harfield discovered discrepancies in the charities, financial ledgers. She confided in someone she trusted, and that person, unfortunately for you, wrote down a single name." He extended a slip of paper, each letter stark and damning. "Louis." Lady Velacourt looked as if she might collapse. "Louis, you, after all my family has done for you." Louis's composure finally cracked. He glared at Poirot with a mixture of fury and resignation. "She shouldn't have gone digging." His voice was low, gravelly. "She found what she shouldn't have found." "And Julian?" Clara whispered, horrified. "You hurt him too?" Louis's expression darkened. He followed. He overheard. He tried to play hero. Poirot stepped forward sharply. "Where are they, Mr. Louis? Speak now. You have run out of shadows." Rain battered the windows with renewed ferocity. Louis looked around the room, at the faces pointed toward him with revulsion, fear, disbelief. It was clear he understood that denial was futile now. But instead of answering, Louis made a sudden, violent movement toward the door, an attempt at escape. He didn't get far. Inspector Upton lunged, 2 officers slamming Louis to the ground before he could clear the threshold. He struggled, snarling like a trapped animal, until Upton forced his arms behind him and snapped the cuffs closed. "Enough," Upton barked. "You're finished." Poirot approached slowly. "You will tell us," he said, voice solemn, "because your silence risks the lives of 2 young people, and monsieur, you know very well you did not kill them, not yet. You would not dispose of the only leverage you possess." Louis froze, breath jagged. Clara felt cold dread creeping through her. "Poirot, he hasn't killed them, has he?" Poirot shook his head gently. "No. He needed Miss Harfield quiet, but alive, at least until he moved the funds she discovered. And Julian, he became an obstacle, a complication." Louis's breathing quickened. "They won't find them," he hissed. "Not in this weather, not before—" Poirot knelt beside him, his voice soft but lethal. "Before what?" Louis spat the words like poison. "Before the storm washes away every trace." A horrified silence descended. Poirot rose. "We do not need traces now. We need only your fear." Louis stiffened. Poirot leaned closer. "You are not a mastermind, monsieur. You are frightened. You improvised. You panicked when Julian intervened, and you hid them somewhere close, somewhere you could reach quickly, somewhere familiar enough to navigate even in the dark." He gestured toward the tall windows. "The storm is rising. You would not dare risk the woods, nor the cliffs, nor the lake path. You hid them on the estate." Clara's breath hitched. "But where?" "We've searched." "Not thoroughly," Poirot murmured. "Not with understanding." He stepped toward the center of the room, his voice gaining strength. "You hid Mademoiselle Harfield where she would not call for help. A place cold, quiet, isolated, but not far. A place that in daylight seems entirely harmless." His eyes lifted, meeting Clara's. "The greenhouse," she whispered. Poirot gave a slight bow. "Très bien. Shall we be swift?" Upton cursed, turning to the officers. "Move, now." They stormed into the hall, running through the echoing corridors as thunder cracked overhead. Clara ran beside Poirot, heart racing, believing every agonizing second lost might cost Lexie her life. The path to the greenhouse was slick with rain. Wind whipped at their coats. The glass structure loomed ahead, lit only by the intermittent flashes of lightning. Its silhouette was eerie, beautiful, yet sinister in the storm's fury. Poirot pushed the door. It creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with humidity and the scent of soil. Their lanterns cast wavering pools of light across tables of orchids and rare ferns. "Lexie!" Clara called, voice breaking. Poirot raised a hand. "Listen." A faint sound, a whimper, muffled, trembling, answered. Clara rushed ahead. Behind a stack of large ceramic pots, bound but conscious, lay Alexandra Harfield. Her eyes, wide, terrified, filled with tears the moment she saw Clara. "Lexie!" Clara dropped to her knees, sobbing as she untied the knots around Lexie's wrists. Poirot moved past them, deeper into the greenhouse. "Inspector," he called quietly. Julian was there, slumped against a bench, bruised but breathing. They were alive. Clara clung to Lexie as if afraid she might vanish again. Lexie shook uncontrollably. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "I tried to tell you what I found." Poirot knelt beside her, his voice warm, steady. "Mademoiselle, you were most brave. The darkness of others does not diminish your courage." Upton approached, shaken. "Poirot, if we'd waited any longer—" Poirot exhaled softly. "Then we would be telling a very different story." Clara looked at him through tears. "Poirot, how did you know?" "Truly?" Poirot gave a small, gentle smile. "Because, mademoiselle, the human mind leaves traces far clearer than footprints. Louis feared being caught, and in fear, the criminal always returns to the place he knows best." He stood, adjusting his tie. "And now," he added, "the rest of the truth may unfold in the proper light of morning." Outside, the storm finally began to pass. Inside the greenhouse, surrounded by life that had survived the night, Clara realized the worst was over. But Poirot's expression, thoughtful and unreadable, suggested one final truth remained, waiting for its proper moment to be revealed. The storm had passed entirely by morning, leaving Velacourt Manor washed clean beneath a soft veil of mist. Sunlight pierced the thinning clouds, scattering across the lawns in delicate gold. Inside the manor, however, a hush lingered, an aftermath of whispered gratitude, subdued shock, and the unmistakable relief that accompanies the narrow escape of tragedy. Poirot, as ever, had risen early. He now stood in the same east-facing drawing-room where panic had first taken hold hours earlier. With careful precision, he arranged the tea tray so each cup aligned perfectly with its saucer. He adjusted a stack of coasters, just slightly, then folded his hands in satisfaction. The world, once more, was returning to order. Clara entered quietly, her steps tentative, as though afraid to disturb him. "Monsieur Poirot?" He turned with a warm smile. "Ah, mademoiselle. And how is your cousin?" Clara exhaled softly, relief softening her features. "Resting. The doctor says she'll recover fully. She keeps asking to see you, you know." Poirot's expression softened. "In time. For now, she must allow her nerves to settle. Such ordeals shake the spirit as much as the body." Clara nodded, emotion rising in her throat. "Monsieur Poirot." "Thank you. You saved her life. And Julian's." Poirot raised a gentle hand. "No, no. I merely assembled the pieces of the puzzle. It was Miss Harfield who left the clues. It was Julian who fought to protect her. I simply followed the truth where it wished to be found." Clara smiled, though her eyes glistened. "Still, we owe you everything." Poirot accepted this quietly, with a small, dignified bow. The manor's great doors opened then, and Inspector Upton entered, wiping remnants of drizzle from his coat. "Poirot," he called, "we're taking Roe into town. Louis as well. They'll be transferred to Reading for holding." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "And they travel peacefully?" as peacefully as men can after their schemes collapse, Upton muttered. Then his voice softened. It's something, though, seeing justice fall into place. Cleanly, neatly, you have my respect. Poirot inclined his head modestly. Merci, Inspector, though I suspect you prefer your crimes without quite so much imagination. You're not wrong, Upton chuckled tiredly. Lady Velacourt approached next, draped in pearls and sorrow. Monsieur Poirot, she said weakly, nothing I say will express my gratitude. Poirot bowed. Your son acted bravely, madame, and your trust in that bravery was well placed. She dabbed at her eyes. I failed to see the danger growing under my own roof. Poirot considered her with gentle empathy. When danger hides behind loyalty, even the watchful are sometimes deceived. Grief can make us blind, but so can trust. Lady Velacourt took a long, trembling breath. We will rebuild, restore the charity's accounts fully, see to it that Lexi's efforts are honored. Perhaps something good might emerge from all of this. Poirot smiled. Good, madame, emerges when truth is permitted to breathe. When she had gone, Clara remained. A question stirred, her features, uncertainty mingling with gratitude. There is something I still do not understand, she said quietly. Last night, when everything was chaos, how did you know the greenhouse was where Louis hid them? Poirot gave a soft, pleased hum. Ah, a matter of psychology, mademoiselle. Louis is a man who fears the unknown, but he is comfortable in his domain. When cornered, people retreat to what they know best. Clara nodded slowly. And he feared losing control. Yes, Poirot said. He feared Roe, he feared discovery, but most of all, he feared unpredictability. The greenhouse was his sanctuary. There he believed he could watch over them until Roe decided what must be done. A quiet shudder ran through Clara. A sanctuary turned prison. Poirot touched her arm gently. Not all sanctuaries are what they seem. A soft voice called from the doorway. Clara? Lexi stood there, pale but alive, wrapped in a shawl. Clara rushed to her, folding her cousin into a tight embrace. Poirot watched with subtle satisfaction as Lexi smiled at him weakly. You found me, she whispered. Poirot bowed slightly. It was you, mademoiselle, who ensured you would be found. You left the glove. You fought. You endured. Lexi's voice trembled. Julian did too. He tried so hard to protect me. Clara helped her to a seat. He's resting. He'll want to see you soon. Poirot adjusted a vase on the side table, just a fraction to the left, then turned to Lexi with quiet reverence. You have a strong spirit, he said softly. Stronger than you believe. She managed a grateful smile. I thought I'd never see morning. Ah, Poirot said gently. And yet here you are. Morning comes even after the darkest night. There was peace in the room now. Soft, fragile, deeply earned. Inspector Upton cleared his throat from the doorway. Poirot, we'll be off now. Poirot nodded. Go with care, mon ami. And drink something warm. The storm was most unkind. Upton chuckled. You and your hot beverages. Poirot smiled, smoothing his mustache. Hot chocolate is the guardian of the little grey cells. Clara laughed softly, for the first time since the ordeal began. Poirot picked up his hat and gloves from the table. And now, mes amis, I must return to London. I leave you to healing and to future days more peaceful than these. Lexi whispered, We won't forget you. Poirot made a small, elegant bow. Then I leave content. He stepped out into the cool morning, pausing on the manor steps as the first true rays of sunrise touched the horizon. The lawns shimmered with dew, and the world smelled fresh, renewed. Poirot inhaled deeply. Order restored, he murmured to himself, as it must always be. And with that, Hercule Poirot descended the steps, leaving Velacourt Manor behind, its secrets laid bare, its dangers ended, its morning finally come.